Yugoslavia was a country between the early 1900s up until the early 2000s. Unfortunately, Yugoslavia had a very dark history, and to understand it all, we need to start from the beginning. Yugoslavia came into existence after the end of World War I. It was created from the Kingdom of Serbia, Montenegro, and parts of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The majority of people in Yugoslavia were Slavs. The Slavs liked the idea of making their own country, so they named it Yugoslavia, meaning Land of the Southern Slavs. However, the country came to an end all too quickly. In 1941, Yugoslavia was invaded by the Nazis and Axis powers. Yugoslavia's army eventually surrendered to the Nazis after a brutal battle in Belgrade. However, the people of Yugoslavia did not accept this and eventually managed to kick the Nazis and other enemies out. After World War II, Yugoslavia was rebuilt. The new country was called the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The new country was based on socialism and had 6 republics, all of which had a large degree of autonomy. These republics included Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, and Macedonia, all of which are their own country today. After World War II, a man by the name of Josip Broz Tito became the leader of Yugoslavia. In his starting years as president, he ran the country just as Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union would. However, Stalin became very weary of Tito, and the two formed a rivalry. Stalin tried to kill Tito many times but never succeeded. After Stalin died, Tito changed his view on the way he was running the country. He figured that communism may not have been the best way to run the country, so he started enforcing socialism. Socialism allowed workers to manage industrial enterprises and share profits with other workers. He thought that this would be a good mix of communism with also capitalism, so workers could manage their own profits, but the government still had a major control over the country. But in 1980, Tito died. This was a problem because he didn't have anyone to hand the presidency over to, so what they ended up doing was distributing the presidency over the 6 republics and 2 autonomous regions, which were Kosovo and Vojvodina. This did not work very well because each republic had their own idea of what they wanted the country to look like. And this eventually led to the crash of the Yugoslavian economy. It was eventually destroyed because of inflation. Part of the reason for this was the Cold War. During the Cold War, the Communist East wanted Yugoslavia to turn to communism, and the capitalist West wanted Yugoslavia to turn to capitalism. So what they ended up doing was the East started giving money to Yugoslavia to convince them to turn to communism, and the West started doing the same thing. So eventually, Yugoslavia was getting a lot of money from these countries. But after the end of the Cold War, Yugoslavia was not receiving any more money from any of these countries because there was no need from the other countries to give money to Yugoslavia anymore. So when the economy crashed, Yugoslavia eventually ran out of money to give the people. And by this time, ethnic tensions were getting very high. The recognized ethnicities in Yugoslavia at the time were Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Macedonians, Montenegrins, Bosnian Muslims, and they also were unrecognized ethnicities such as the Albanians who lived in Kosovo. In 1989, Slobodan Milosevic became the new president of Serbia. He wanted to turn Yugoslavia into a Serbian-controlled country. Slobodan set up a Serbian government in Kosovo, Vojvodina, and Montenegro. This was a problem because if the republics were to ever vote on a certain topic, Serbia would automatically have the vote of Kosovo, Vojvodina, and Montenegro. This made it very difficult for the other republics to win the vote. Due to Slobodan's unfairness, Croatia and Slovenia decided to secede from Yugoslavia. However, Croatia's secession from Yugoslavia did not go as planned. A large amount of Croatia's population was ethnic Serbian. The Serbian government was still trying to create a greater Serbia. This meant that Serbia did not want Croatia to secede from Yugoslavia. This was the start of the Yugoslav Wars. During this time, Macedonia managed to secede from Yugoslavia. However, when Bosnia tried to secede, it had the same problem as Croatia, in which they had a large population of ethnic Serbians. Serbia and Montenegro were the only two republics left, so they formed a new Yugoslavia called the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, but it was not recognized by other international organizations. From 1992 to 1995, Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina was a deadly battleground, genocide, concentration camps, and mass graves. The war was getting so bad that NATO and the UN came to help Croatia and Bosnia. The war eventually came to an end when NATO set up a bombing campaign and bombed Serbian-held positions, while the Croats and Bosnians pushed the Serbian troops out of their territory. After the war, the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed. This agreement allowed for peace in Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. It also allowed Serbia to keep Kosovo and Montenegro. However, in 2003, Montenegro voted for independence, as well as Kosovo. There are now 7 separate countries in the Balkans. These countries include Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, Macedonia, and now Kosovo. This was a brutal time in history, and Yugoslavia did have the chance to become a great country, but unfortunately it ended in a brutal war. Hopefully this never happens again, but at the moment, the Balkans are currently in peace and will hopefully stay that way.